Okay, let's dive right into this explainer on how we can safely harness the absolute powerhouse that is AI using structured risk treatment plans. Look, we all know artificial intelligence is completely transforming the way we work, but with that incredible power comes some pretty massive responsibility. So today, we're going to explore exactly how the ISO/IEC 42001-2023 standard provides a really rigorous, highly actionable framework to help us identify and, more importantly, neutralize the unique risks that AI systems introduce to our organizations.
But before we get bogged down in the technical weeds, we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. How do you actually tame something as autonomous and complex as an AI while still keeping things totally secure and compliant? It's kind of like trying to hit a moving target, right? Because unlike your traditional, rigid software systems, AI systems actually learn, they adapt, and they operate with probabilistic behaviors. Which means the risks, things like algorithmic bias, data privacy breaches, or model drift, they're constantly evolving. To tame that level of unpredictability, we absolutely cannot just sit back and react. We need a structured, proactive methodology that's baked right into the system's entire lifecycle.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover aligning AI with our core goals, break down the 4 specific risk treatments, apply those to some real-world strategies, look at building out your CRTP, and finally, talk about gathering that all-important audit-ready evidence. Let's get moving. Section 1, aligning AI with ISO goals, the stakes of AI compliance. Okay, so clause 6.1.2. This clause requires us to define risk treatment. And we're not just talking about risk treatment as some abstract concept, but as the literal bridge between identifying a scary vulnerability and actually fixing it. I mean, let's be real. It is one thing to know your AI might have a problem. It is an entirely different beast to have a documented, context-sensitive action plan ready to address it. This clause is essentially laying down the law, mandating that the outcomes of your risk assessments absolutely must be linked directly to actionable, proportionate steps that you can actually prove to an auditor. To put this into perspective, we just have to map the standard's big, bright goals against the terrifying real-world failures we're trying to dodge. It's like a giant puzzle where every piece matters. If our primary goal is AI quality, well, the corresponding failure we're fighting is model drift, where the AI basically gets sloppy and inaccurate over time. If the goal is ethical fairness, we have to aggressively, and I mean aggressively, prevent biased decision-making. And when we talk about legal compliance, a failure there means disastrous privacy breaches. Imagine running afoul of GDPR. Yeah, no thank you. So every single risk treatment we design is fundamentally about playing defense against these specific, catastrophic failures.
Section 2, the 4 risk treatments, your tactical toolkit.
Now, the really crucial takeaway here is that you've got 4 distinct strategic options. Think of them as your 4 superpowers to handle literally any AI risk the universe throws at you. You don't ever just vaguely fix a risk. You intentionally choose between risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk sharing, which is sometimes called risk transfer, and risk retention. And which one you pick? Well, that depends entirely on the severity of the risk, the likelihood of it happening, and of course the financial cost of actually mitigating it.
Section 3, real-world AI strategies, applying the 4 treatments. Theory is great and all, but let's contrast the extremes to see how this works in the wild. On one extreme, we have risk avoidance. Imagine a tech firm is developing a predictive policing system. During their assessment, they flag some severe legal concerns regarding racial bias, not to mention the potential for massive societal backlash. The absolutely correct treatment here, risk avoidance. They document a formal decision to halt deployment entirely because that risk is just radioactive. It's way too great. Contrast that with risk retention. Say you've got a quirky conversational AI chatbot that occasionally shows some minor performance issues when it encounters low-usage regional dialects. Because user exposure is super limited and the cost of retraining the entire massive model is astronomical, well, the organization might just decide to retain or accept that risk. They simply document it, maybe provide some fallback human support, and move on with their lives. Now, what about risk reduction? Honestly, this is going to be your most commonly used tool. Think about an AI-enabled hiring platform. If you discover a risk of biased candidate scoring, you don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and scrap the whole system. Instead, you step-by-step implement bias mitigation algorithms to reweight the training data. Then, you mandate routine human reviews of the scoring across different demographic groups. You are actively, practically, reducing the likelihood and the impact of the risk down to a level you can actually live with. And hey, if you can't fix it entirely in-house, you can always lean on risk sharing.
basically transferring the headache. You might transfer the financial burden of, say, a successful phishing attack or a data breach over to a third party. Organizations do this all the time by drafting really strict service-level agreements with their vendors or by purchasing sweet, comprehensive cyber insurance policies to cover potential financial losses. The risk itself still exists, for sure, but the crippling financial liability, that's shared.
Section 4. Building the CRTP, the blueprint for compliance.
Okay, this brings us to the ultimate boss-level question every compliance professional eventually faces. How do you actually prove your brilliant risk strategies to a lead auditor? Because listen, under ISO/IEC 42001-2023, if a risk treatment isn't meticulously documented, then as far as the auditor is concerned, it literally never happened. Your absolute, unquestionable proof is the Cybersecurity Risk Treatment Plan, or the CRTP. This central document is your Bible. It must list every single one of your decisions. If you mitigated a risk, you need to write down the specific technical and administrative controls you deployed. If you retained a risk, the auditor wants to read your exact logical rationale for why you thought the impact was no big deal. If you shared a risk, you better have those vendor agreements or insurance policies attached. And if you avoided a risk, you have to document the justification for completely altering your business practices to sidestep it. The whole shebang has to be in there.
And to back this up, Clause 8.1 lends absolute authority here. It specifically states that your documented treatments cannot just sit on some dusty shelf in the compliance office to look pretty. No way. They must be baked directly into your standard operating procedures. What that means is your risk treatments have to show up in your everyday data collection workflows, your pre-processing guidelines, and your pre-deployment ethical checklists. A lead auditor will literally walk around and check to see if your daily, on-the-ground operational procedures match the grand strategies you outlined in your treatment plan.
Section 5. Audit-ready evidence. Proving continuous improvement. Remember, risk management in AI isn't a set-it-and-forget-it kind of deal. It's highly dynamic. You have to use ongoing methods to evaluate if your implemented treatments are actually doing their job. Clause 10.3 literally demands continual improvement. So how do you prove that? Well, you show the auditor your before and after fairness metric scores. You show them the hard results of model revalidation tests running on fresh data. You bring out documented stakeholder feedback proving that user complaints have totally dropped off. And you pull up your key risk indicator, or KRI, dashboards that are set up to trigger immediate alerts if the AI starts drifting off course. This is how you prove to the world that your treatments are not just theoretical, but effective and alive. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, slightly provocative thought to make sure all of this sticks. Your AI system is only as safe and only as compliant as your documentation proves it to be. Let me say it again. An undocumented treatment is a failed audit. So, you've got to choose your treatments wisely, integrate them incredibly deeply into your daily operations, and go forth and document wonderfully. Which of these 4 treatments will you need to apply to your own AI systems first? Thanks so much for joining this explainer and learning with us today.